So my name is Thomas Raynaud, and I'm an architect, and I work and live in Paris. And I'm a principal of an office called BuildingBuilding since around 2007. And at the beginning of our practice, we start to work on several projects that share almost the same context. The context of dealing with a kind of heritage. Technically, we can call them a renovation project or a refurbishing project. And a project that question pre-existing architecture, not necessary in a sense of a cultural heritage through the medium of architecture, like monuments or landmarks, but more on banal situation occupied by a construction. And if there is a reason of this repetition of subject, it's probably because for young French office, it's easier to have access to this kind of command. And also, probably because I'm most interested or more curious as a primary motivation about the relationship between object and the object themselves. And in a very basic point of view, if we consider architecture as a way to produce specific condition on a pre-existing environment, or more precisely to divide the world into increased or improved construction situation, it contains always the question of establishing an order on the previous one. So the first project I will show you mainly concerns the question of economy of means through a programmatic indeterminacy. Economy of means because it's a project with a very low budget where money could be a problem. And programmatic indeterminacy because we start the project without a defined program, but with an existing building. And it's an abandoned factory in the city of Marseille in the south of France. And as an industrial building of the end of the 19th century, it contains a certain efficiency, a certain efficient capacity. 3 floors, 3 plants, constructed by a rational mixed structure of stone and cast iron columns, concrete flooring, wood frame for the roof, and for masonry wall for the perimeter. And as I said, we start literally without program because also in a certain way, also without clients. Because after studies for the city of Marseille, we start at the beginning studies for the city of Marseille, kind of inventory project of observation. And then we met an art school that was interested to move into the factory, but the factory was a little too big for their needs and also for their budget. And by a very pragmatic approach, with a minimum of intervention, we proposed to produce an interior order by dividing the free plan into a corridor, distributing a set of rooms more or less equal in terms of area, detached from a programmatic infill. So really not the invention of the year. It's not more a flexible space as a free plan, but it's a very trivial organization where each room in terms of capacity could receive potentially a programmatic elements of a school. It could be a drawing room studio, it could be a photo studio, it could be a meeting room, it could be a reprography, an archive room for archives or the administration or the direction, or a mix of what you want, and so on. So in a certain way, it's a project looking for the necessary and the sufficient, but not in a functional way. It's a definition of a spatial orders for a kind of let-it-go occupation. And we're repeating the same plan on the 3 levels. So the school is a set of 3 corridors and 15 rooms. Even if you can inhabit it as you want, the question of the occupation is not really our business in this context. It was a kind of active demission from our part. for the benefit, let's say, an experience of appropriation. So the same plan, but different floors. Obviously different condition. So the ground floor corridors is obviously the old entrance. The first floor corridors is a windowless room, and the top floor corridor is a room with a glass canopy. So same result with the other rooms. So at the end we have this collection of rooms with different morphology, different types of lights, with the same minimum modern equipment of electric outlet, heating and heating system, and a sink in each room. So this is a room with large windows. This is a room with narrow windows. This is a room without windows, and this is a room with one window, and so on. So in a way, we are looking for the most neutral device following the existing structure for the maximum variety of spaces, where each of them has specific qualities produced by an operation of division. So it's a very simple project produced by a clear but short intention. So almost the same project, or rather the same approach for scenography in Paris. And we didn't try to find any narrative link between the project and the content of the exhibition. It was only a question of space as a tool for the curators to organize the content of the exhibition. Unlike the previous one that followed the structural rules of the existing space, we divide arbitrarily the space, let's say as a kind of axiom of 11 walls and into 42 equal rooms. So agreed as a natural measure, a project of one rules that produce a variety of conditions by separation or rather by isolation. So it's a project of partition, but not totally. A partition with a certain weakness, simply because the walls are small, 155 centimeters high. So you have always and simultaneously the consciousness of big space and small spaces. And what I'm interested in this kind of drawing protocol, it's that it integrates some collateral accidents, some semi-involuntary situation. It's part of the process. It sometimes produces something, and sometimes it's producing nothing. Yeah? So maybe here it's the second option, not very productive, like this dead-end footbridge, or useless handrail, or an interrupted stairs, and so on. But the main goal of the project is obviously not to produce silly situation, just for my own pleasure. It's above all fragmented environment as a tool, where the curators could practice a fragmented speech, basically a room for one content, inhabited by one subject or one media or pre-existing element of furniture, without any hierarchy. So it's a grid between a context and a content. So the two previous projects question only an interior order, and the next three share almost the same starting point. In a rural region with a house and a lake. And I like lakes. I like lakes because they contain a certain picturesque value as a landscape element with an ambiguous state. Sometimes they are natural and sometimes they are artificials. And in the picture, this one is an artificial lake in the Morvan in the center and east of France. And as an anthropic landscape, it contains a huge and in a way virtuous shift in its mercantile use. The shift between a piece of a huge hydraulic network provide firewoods for the city of Paris during the 19th century, and an actual opportunity for a touristic economy, a nautic base for holidays. And as a vestige of the first use of the lake, it remains few elements, a dam and a house. And the house looks like a bourgeois mansion with its symmetric French harmony, a sort of little eccentricity, especially in an environment mostly occupied during the summer by seasonal restaurants and camping cars. But the mansion is not really a mansion. It's a tiny abandoned worksite camp for the engineer to survey the workers during the construction of the dam. Except the exercise of the symmetry, not really a big piece of architecture, not a big piece of history, just an available construction. And in a support to the touristic development, the community of village around the lake want to extend the house into a cultural and touristic equipment, an information booth with some exhibition space, a shop, offices, meeting rooms. The generic specification, sorry for my English, the generic specifications for the cultural equipment. And the house has also a garden with a controlled relief and a few outbuildings in poor condition. And we were paying close attention to the seasonal use of the territory. During the summer, it's full of tourists, let's say during 3 or 4 months, and for the rest of the year, it's quite a desert. So why provide permanent equipment for mainly periodical use? And to answer this question, the project proposed to renovate and innovate the existing stone construction as a permanent and functional environment, and add a bigger room that follows seasonal climatic change. A weak room, a room as an in-between environment. A volume that it removes the wind, the rain and the snow, but that it followed the change of the solar light and the temperature. So a room not defined by a function, but by a condition. So not really an invention. We call it in French jardin d'hiver or winter garden, greenhouse, hothouse. So glass house that isolates some elements of the existing landscape. So a room where uses are changing according to the season. So the next project concerns a small villa along a natural lake near the French Alps, and a community of villages buy this plot and want to create again a tourist equipment to promote the lake. Almost the same situation that the previous project. But this time the client said that it would be better if we remove the villa. So we asked why, and they said that they just don't like it. And for us, it's quite difficult to define something if it's beautiful or ugly, because it's a question of taste. And we don't care about taste. Everybody has his own taste, and it's almost impossible to include it as a parameter of a sharing project. And as a starting point, we decide to keep it as a condition that is already there, an available surface. But the villa was also too small for their ambitions. They want offices, some facilities, different exhibition space, a coffee, a shop, and so on. So we need to create more space. And as I said before, for us, architecture could probably be defined by the relationship between the object and the object itself. So we provide a bigger room, a room around the villa to increase the area and define a new inhabited perimeter. So now we have 2 objects, one we found and one we choose, with their own specific qualities and capacities. A combination of relation between 2 objects in a certain context. With the minimum of intervention, so 1 here, the goal is to provoke the maximum opportunities. It's still a question of choice than a question of an invention. So in terms of qualities, we have now this collection of small rooms in the existing villa as a domestic landscape with these specular materials. Each room has a specific window, a balcony, a fireplace, a lot of elements that we probably never provide if we start with nothing less than just a specification of the program. And a bigger room, basically made by walls and a roof. It's a room, but it's not really a room. It's a continuous space, but not an homogeneous space. The four wings has different thickness and have not relation with the outside. And also we have this third space in between, not totally designed and not totally found as a collateral situation, a resulting space, an outdoor room occupied by a house. So after this little operation, it's now the question of occupation, how to occupy this variety of spaces. So that's the ground floor with this big loop, like a thick wall around the house, where it's possible to provide public facilities in extension of the garden, the lake, or the courtyard. And the existing house is possible to include some permanent function, the storage and the restroom. And on the first floor of the house, the offices. So you are working on holiday house. So the section, not the section. And that's how we conceive a possible way to inhabit the project. It's mainly a question of furniture and uses. It's always possible to start over with a different layout. So the view of the garden, from the garden, and the view from the opposite bank of the lake. Third project with an existing house near a lake. So the house is on an island, on an artificial lake in the center of France. It's a young landscape. The lake was constructed in the 50s to provide electric power for the region. In the 80s, the Ministry of Culture decided to transform the island into an art park for sculpture, with an art center in the middle, actually designed by Aldo Rossi and Xavier Fabre. And near the art center, there's a house that was here before the lake, and the project was to transform it into an artist residences as an extension of the art center. So it's a house, but not really a house. It's a small castle. Or it's a house that looks like a castle, kind of neo-Gothic pastiche from the beginning of the 20th century. So in this castle, some functions were already there, organized by the set of small rooms. It was possible to sleep or to cook, and it was just missing the possibility of a place where artists could work together, a studio, an atelier. So the project mainly looking for the definition of what could be a studio for a group of artists. First of all, we try to provide a bigger room, but this time by subtraction, following the morphology of the castle. A room inside a castle, but with a certain autonomy to increase the capacity of the studio. It has its own entrance to provide a continuity with the park. It crosses the entire castle on every floor, and by subtraction, the resulting space still remains for domestic uses. So, outside, there is no sign of an intervention, only a new door, the door of the studio. And it's mainly used as a studio, but we propose during the studies to increase its capacities and possibility of uses by changing its state into an exhibition space, a public space, with an ambivalent state where artists work in their own exhibition space. So the studio gallery is finally not so big, around 120 square meters. It's a continuous space qualified by a variety of situations, with an outdoor part in the end. So finally, we consider the studio as a tool not determined by the function, but determined by the multiple conditions and situations for permanently changing uses. And for the rest, the domestic part, we did with the minimum transformation. So no more lake, but still an existing building on a river. It's a project for a museum in memory of the French poet Arthur Rimbaud. But I will not talk about Rimbaud. It's not the real subject. Quickly, because also we didn't believe in analogy with content. We precisely don't practice an analogy in our project. So it starts with this old water mill. But this time there is no question of do we need to keep it or not. The building is an historical monument, or to be precise, the facade and the roof is registered in the list of historic monuments. So the Ministry of Culture has decided for the client and for us. But this typical French registration don't have so much interest in space, only for the elements of the construction, a roof and one facade. But it's okay. Architecture is already there. We don't want to negotiate with it. We don't want to try the risky exercise of an extension. Probably it's a game lost in advance. Even if it's possible to act on the other part of the building, we know that the project will concern only the volume inside the building, a non-visible project. But we were a little bit frustrated by the area developed in the water mill. It was a big volume, but a small area. So we decided to increase the area, to double the size of the area in the perimeter of the water mill. And this simple goal becomes the entire project, a project about quantities, to propose an architecture inside another one, by increasing the area. Just a question of quantity, with his own structure, his own syntax. So after removing the 3 existing floors and add 6 levels in the bigger room, we start to work on a model. And a museum could be defined as an available storage, where it's possible to perform activities and probably develop a story about Rimbaud. So the structure is inside the building, and we have also a full room and an empty room. And the autonomy of the structure, in a massive construction, we choose a wireframe construction for technical reason, but also as a starting point for an organization. It's already an order with a grid of columns, repeating 6 times as a small free plan. And at this time, for us, the job is over, as the definition of a project, to define an architecture as a support, as a substructure, where it's possible to perform, where it's possible to use it with a kind of indifference. But of course, we care about how it's possible to use it. But it's a matter of the content. It's open to different typology as a cyclical situation. So we try some possibilities, or maybe we try to find all the possibilities as archetypes, with some silly option like full of corridors, big room and small rooms, and so on. So that's the view of the ground floor under the structure. That's a possible floor with some objects, a possible floor with walls, and always never touch the existing buildings. Our structure just tolerates as a guest. It's probably not a permanent architecture. And it could also accept some other degrees of autonomy, like a house in a house in a house. And that's the last model, with a possible combination of typologies, the project with the full option. So the last project I will quickly show you is one of our last projects. It's a project about a park. No more old buildings as a starting point, but in a way it's still the same story, an existing park. So the park is in the capital of Albania, in Tirana. One of the particularities of the city is that it seems to be constructed around the two very opposite urban fabrics. The first one is completely ruled by the face of order of an order that can plan over the world through a limited number of projects, very strong in their intention during the 20th century. Projects that define the urban organization as a rational order. Let's say a modern project. And the second seems on the opposite, moved by the spontaneous tendencies. Isolate until the 90s, Tirana suddenly enter in a new phase of development. While major corporations multiply the ground with skyscraper, population start build illegal construction where it can lay down a brick. So in the Tirana Park itself, it's clearly a modern project. It's built in the 50s around an artificial lake. And the project is a proposal for competition. And the brief of the competition was to reorganize the northwest of the park by adding new buildings, a public center, headquarters for the police, some office for the administration, facilities for the faculty, facilities for the park, car parks for the visitors, and so on. So quite huge projects that tends into a kind of contradiction. So by refusing a programmatic approach on a park that could be considered as an available surface for real estate development, we pay attention to the limits between the city and the park, in a certain way without questioning the states, but the limits through their simultaneity, their concomitance. The project is to reaffirm a clear border, but neither one which is designed as a master plan with a modern attitude, let's say from the political. Nor is it an informal project, mimicking the vernacular fabric. We propose a project adaptable to the structural versatility of the city, a project that can negotiate without frustrated. So we propose the production of intrinsic approach of the border, generate from within its own syntax, a sum of singular local bordering devices. On each side of the border in the city and in the park, we intend to place a number of devices relieving by local situation. So the project becomes a set of projects without a predefined coherence between them. Only the definition of a border through a set of variety of existing or provoked situations. So local devices generalize into a border. And I'm finished. 30 minutes, I did it really quick. Thank you.